Sarah, welcome to the Coach's Journey podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me. I've been really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, me too, actually. We first met. Sarah has a great podcast, and it has one particularly great episode that I know about, which has got just got me on it.
Features Robbie.
But like I think I said this to you at some point. Like you played a really key role in my crazy idea last year to appear on 100 podcasts, because I put that challenge out there, and you sent me a message on Twitter pretty soon after I mentioned it saying, yeah, come on my show. And I think I knew about you, but only a bit via Twitter, I think. I don't think we might talk about this. I don't think we'd connected. I don't think either of us can remember connecting actually through the cultural sector, although we do both have some background in that and know quite a lot of people in common. And so it was quite a thing. It was like, on some level, I knew that challenge was possible, but also to have somebody I essentially didn't know respond to it in the way that I kind of needed some people to respond to it began to make it possible. So we actually didn't, it then took us ages to actually do that. But the whole time that was a part of that. So thank you for that.
No, you're very welcome. I love those kind of challenges. When I first started my coaching, I coached 100 people for free in 100 days. And so that's it's really up my street to do that kind of thing. And I think there's such a generosity. And connection is important, isn't it? And getting to know people who share the same values and freelancing, being self-employed, solo coach, whatever, it can be a very lonely journey. So I'm always up for finding people to have conversations with.
Yeah, sure. So that's interesting. I mean, we'll kind of get into the journey in different ways, but so where did you get that idea to do 100 people in 100 days?
I launched my coaching practice in March 2020, which is obviously a fantastic time to start a business.
By coincidence, or
yeah. So I had kind of been. It's sort of taken me a while to decide that actually no, coaching is the thing I want to do, and I don't want to go back into employment. I want to see what it's like to start a business and do this work, and had kind of made that decision. And then obviously the pandemic happened, and I was a bit like, what do I do? I did just not gonna look like what I thought it was gonna look like, and I don't have a lot of experience in coaching, although looking back, actually, I had more than I thought I had. And I was doing, have you heard of WBEX? It's like an American, I don't know what you'd call it. Like they do lots of they do like what's it called?
It stands
a summit
for,
every year.
Yeah. If people don't know it,
it's for coaches. Cool. Yeah.
I think they probably realized I probably didn't get enough customers from me. For a while, I was like an affiliate partner, this show was. So if people listen to certain episodes from 18 months and 2.5 years ago, they'll find a little advert for WBEX because I had Marsha Reynolds on the show, who does a lot of partnership with WBEX.
Yeah, she does.
And so it stands for the World Business and Executive Coaching Summit. But really what it is just like, well, I don't know, I've never paid for the full version, but the free one,
no, I haven't,
when I was first starting out, is like, I don't know, I find it kind of a little hit and miss, but it's free, so you can't really argue with it. But when I went to it, and when I was kind of early in my business, because it's like free training from world leading people.
Exactly. Okay.
Exactly. And so you were on WBEX, were you?
I was doing their free summit, and I was doing loads of free stuff with EMCC as well, which is the European Mentoring and Coaching Council. And they were offering lots of free stuff at the time as well. So I was just consuming all of this training and trying to understand like where I stood within coaching and what my coaching might look like. And there was and I cannot remember the name of this man, Jonathan Rees, maybe. He I could be totally wrong with that. Anyway, this person who I was watching said, wow, if you're a new coach, it was about new coaches. If you're a new coach, just like offer loads of free coaching. He didn't say offer 100 days worth of coaching to 100 people, but I like to take things to the extreme, and I just thought, okay, yeah, I'll do that. Oh, wouldn't it be great to do 100 people working with them for free over 100 days? That sounds like fun. And it would be a way of me practicing my coaching. And so everybody got 2 half-hour sessions. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, by the way. I think there is something in that chucking yourself in and coaching in that way. I learned an awful lot about my style of coaching, about who I wanted to coach, about starting a session quite quickly and ending the session, you know, because I was like moving through one to the next to the next to the next.
Yeah, and in a 30-minute session, if you mess around too much with small talk, you've used up half the session.
Exactly. So I got very good at going. I didn't do small talk. I was like, right, what's on your mind straight away. And yeah, so that's sort of how I did it. And I mean, looking back, there are things I wish I had done, you know, in terms of more marketing and more capturing people's information and data, not their data, but like email addresses and getting them on my newsletter, which I didn't have at the time. And but I think about 10% went on to be paid clients eventually, and people people still connect with me, you know, they'll come, you know, that was what we're talking 3 years ago. So I was in the midst of that 3 years ago, and yeah. Did that answer your question? I can't even remember the original question.
It doesn't matter, Sarah. That's the kind of show this is. Well, let me say a few things. So just for listeners, so that they don't doubt, you said I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing this. I really, really would recommend doing something exactly like that to everyone who is starting a coaching business, who wants to grow their coaching business. So I just want to say that without so that listeners who don't know me can get that without any doubt. I can talk more about why that, but I'm curious for you why you wouldn't necessarily recommend, or what you might recommend and maybe do recommend to coaches if they ask you now.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend the scale of it in a way, like, because it was a lot.
How did you get on, by the way? Did you get the 100?
Yeah, did 102.
Yeah, amazing.
And actually, are we recording the video? Is this video going?
It probably, yeah, it will. It'll be on YouTube, unless, like, the only ones that aren't on YouTube. This is, if people are wondering, if I've ever been on the YouTube page and like, why isn't episode 5 on YouTube? Like, it's only not on YouTube when there's like a bit too much editing to be bothered to do.
Yeah,
Minor Arias, who's in Costa Rica, fantastic episode. But there was a tropical storm midway through the interview. His internet went down, and like cutting the video together, it'll happen at some point, but it's like, that to me feels like, what is it? Like, I'm always thinking 80-20. Like, people can just listen to that one if they really want to find completeness of the podcast. You need to be on Spotify. Anyway, so yes, the video that's short of tropical storms, Sarah, people will see this. Why? What are you going to show us?
Well, if you, so for those of you listening, I apologize because you can't see this, but if you go to any of my social media, you can see it. But there's a brilliant artist called Megan Metcalf who's in Margate, and I commissioned her to do a piece of artwork. You see that piece here?
Oh, you might kind of bottom left frame that we can see. Yeah.
But she depicted 100 people, and then there's me in the middle, and she did a little GIF or GIF. I never quite know how to pronounce that. But yes, why was I showing you that?
A result of the 100. I said, how many did you do? And you said,
that was it. That was it. And this is perimenopause. Often when I stop, forget things. So yes, I think it was very intense. I did it over the summer, and actually since then I've said I'm not working in the summer ever. You know, I take the whole of August off now to spend time with my children, and husband. And I just think the scale of it, I would definitely recommend doing coaching for free for people. I definitely recommend setting yourself a challenge, because I think you can talk about it. It's like a project, you know, you can then look at, how was it before, how was it after, what did I learn in between? It's really helpful to build an audience, that kind of thing. I think the reason I did that as well is because, remember it was the pandemic, and I was in a bit of this feeling of, how can I help? I was looking at people, particularly in the arts and cultural sector, and lots of people had been furloughed, or they were working a gazillion more hours than they had been before. They were, it felt very extreme, and I just thought, what can I do that would make a difference here? And that sort of, I thought, well, I want to make an impact. So yeah, I think it was just I would definitely recommend practicing, and for free, and with as many people as you can. But I think maybe 100 was a bit extreme.
It's a great accelerator for your business, though, because then you've done 200 coaching sessions, 204. You've coached 102 different people. You've learned, like you said, you've learned loads. You will be, by the end of that, you will be sharp at doing a 30-minute session, which is a skill I'm really glad I developed. It's interesting. So I think I've said this on the show before, but one of the bits of associate work that I did recommended 30 or 45-minute sessions. And because of that, I got really good at doing 30 or 45-minute sessions, which meant that now when I do longer sessions, like it's like the skill of doing a focused 30-minute session means that my 60-minute or 90-minute sessions are different. And so it's like those kind of, all those things to practice, all those seeds planted. Yeah, I get it. And we can maybe talk a bit more later on about like wishing you'd captured the email addresses. I have a whole raft of those stories of like, oh, if only I'd set this thing up. There were great reasons why I didn't set this. If only I'd set this thing up like 3 years ago, I'd have like a 500 more emails on my list, and that's kind of nonsense. The funniest one recently was like my blog, the ridiculous fact that you couldn't subscribe to my blog for 6 years of it. It's like, obviously I'd have a whole bunch of more subscribers to that if I'd set it up even 2 years earlier than I did. So there's lots of, I get that, but I just think you can't overestimate what impact that concerted effort. I get it's tiring, and I think that's like energy well spent, essentially. If you're going to spend a bunch of energy when you start in the first so you said you started in March and did this over the summer. So if you're going to, in the first 5 months of your coaching business, spend a load of energy, that's a really, really solid way to spend it, which you will be glad of. Like, that energy will pay you back for years.
But remember also that comes from a place of privilege, because I was able to do that. First of all, I was able to leave my job because at the time my husband was working and bringing in quite a good salary. So I could take that space to do that. And then I spent a few years sort of faffing around growing vegetables and like wondering what on earth I was going to do with my life. And I was able to do that experimentation because I didn't have to worry at that point about suddenly, bringing in money into my business. I could play around with it. So I think, yes, I learned so much, and I learned so much. I have a story to tell. Like, it's an interesting story. I met loads of amazing human beings who were there were real challenges, in that space at that time as well, because people felt so uncertain, so unsafe. But I was able to do it. I was privileged enough to be able to do that. And
just like, I completely get that. I completely agree. And what I'd say is, personally, like, my view would be, if you're starting a coaching business, that kind of thing is like, you weren't doing it for this reason necessarily. That is exactly the smartest move. If you're in coaching for the long haul, that kind of thing, like, you kind of have to, if you start from scratch, you kind of have to create the space somehow to do something a bit like that if you want to speed up how your coaching business grows. Because how your coaching business grows almost always is word of mouth. You doing great, people doing great, with the coach doing great work, building up a referral base, like, and you created 10 or so clients from that. So if people are under pressure to build their coaching business, that is still a good move. Like, it's not it's like, we could talk more about this. My again, this is a view, and you're totally welcome to disagree. My view is there aren't really shortcuts to having a coaching business that sustains. the shortest cut is coach a lot of people. And the challenge like that does a couple of things. It does a load of things, including all the things we've said. And an important thing about giving away coaching in my personal experience is having some container for that. So what you did was great, right? You've got 100 days. So after that, you get to choose, do I still want to be giving away coaching in this way? You also give away just 2 sessions to everybody, which is a lot to be giving, like a lot of your time, you know, through that ability to give away time. But it's not an endless amount of coaching, which is not necessarily the best thing for anyone to be continually giving away coaching. Although there are plenty of times when it's good to just give away a lot of coaching. It's like there's no, someone on the show once said, coaching's like acting. There's no rules, but you have to know them. So it's like, you know, you can do what you like, and it's really wise, I think, to have a container. If you're going to give away a lot of coaching, to have a container around that.
Yeah.
We can talk more about this, Sarah. We might, but let's rewind a little bit. So in March 2020, you already knew about coaching. I know a little bit about probably how you came across that and first came to coach, but for people who don't, and I don't know the actual answer to this question, when did you first come across coaching as a thing?
Yeah, so I think it came from, so I worked in an organization called People United for about 10 years, with someone called Tom Andrews, who was the CEO of the organization, and kind of a bit of a mentor for me as well. And he did a coaching accreditation at some point when I was working there. And he had a naturally coaching approach anyway in his style of leadership. But after the accreditation, I think that's when I really kind of noticed some of those more formal coaching approaches coming in. So I had been coached in a leadership, not one-to-one, but through leadership. And I got to know a bit about what this coaching thing is then. And then when I left that organization, I thought, oh, coaching sounds fun. I'm going to do an accreditation myself. And then recognized that actually I'd probably been coaching throughout my whole career. You know, if I think about, essentially coaching is listening, helping people to create a space to work through stuff, gain new perspectives, problem solve, be witnessed, be seen, be heard, then actually I'd kind of been doing that. I just didn't know it was coaching. So yeah, I think I'd experienced it from that level of having a leader who had a coaching approach. And then learned more about it.
Yeah, Tom, I knew Tom from when I worked at Core Leadership Program, and lovely man with a great presence. He used to run this workshop for the fellows at the end of, for people who don't know, the Core Leadership Program. There's 2 actually. There's one in the cultural sector in the UK, and it does run internationally, and one in this kind of broader charity sector.
Yeah.
And I worked in the cultural sector one, and one of the flagship program at the time, I think it's changed a bit now. It used to work, you know, it was a 9-month kind of leadership program with lots of parts to it. It started and ended with a residential. And I think Tom used to do the last session of the last residential. And basically the fellows, I was there for it once, the fellows would turn up, they'd be like hungover because it was their last night the night before. And so in a bit of a kind of fragile state, they're also in this weird thing, having been on this slightly bizarre trip to Narnia for 9 months, coming back into the world. And Tom was there with Lego for them.
On
that morning. And there was I've got some photos somewhere. They came up actually on like what Google Photos shows me like 8 years ago. So it would have been like, yeah, probably like 9 or 10 years ago today, was picture of Lego on the table in that room from that workshop. Quite recently that came up. Or it must have been it was probably last summer actually. And so there was that sense that you saw it through him and he was doing it, but then it's interesting that you were doing it the whole time to some extent. So why do you think you were doing it? Like, how had you learned that way of being or developed that way of being?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I suppose if I think about kind of, what's important to me, what matters, there's a lot for me around belonging, a lot around helping. I was going to say helping people to feel like they belong, but people do belong. Maybe recognizing that they belong and helping others to kind of to see that we all belong. And through, I trained as a teacher initially in FE, further education, and then I worked for a housing association working with so-called deprived, I'm doing air quotes, because I hate that language, but that's the language that was used at the time, working in deprived neighborhoods. I think helping people to connect with others, to connect to their place, connect to themselves, and that's always been really important to me, because I think when I was young, so my dad was a disabled man, he had cerebral palsy, and I saw that he didn't belong. He didn't feel like he belonged. He was often excluded from spaces. I grew up in a very working class background on one of those deprived estates that I ended up working on, and felt excluded too, and ended up going to a grammar school, felt very different. So my own experiences of that, I think, really supported. It gave me a sense of empathy, I think. I mean, there's also a lot of people pleasing in there, which is a whole other conversation, but if I'm in my wise, healthy self, it's around empathy and helping, just wanting people to feel witnessed. That's essentially it.
Yeah.
That they, that they're here and that someone sees them for who they are.
Yeah. So seeing how important that was, wanting to be like that, and then practicing, sounds like, in a bunch of different ways, doing that.
Yeah. And it happened to be one of the vehicles of that was arts and culture, because so drama and theatre was my thing to start with, because a drama teacher witnessed me. They saw me, and offered me the role of Angel Gabriel in the Christmas play. And I had been a very shy child. Like, there's so many photos of me hiding behind my mum's legs and like, I don't want to be seen. And so I was witnessed and loved being part of that creation of something and working together with people in a team. And there is something about theatre and where and people are all in it together, and they're working towards the same goal, and they love it, they're passionate about it. Yeah, I've sort of lost my thread now, but I think I got into that. Okay, so how can we use arts and creativity and imagination as a way of giving people the space, the time and the space to think about some of this deeper stuff around belonging and kindness and compassion and connection and love and play, all very human strengths and characteristics. Yeah, I loved all of that stuff.
Yeah, it's very evocative. And I don't know if you know this, but I have a really similar story in lots of ways, particularly when you talk about that teacher and what an opportunity it is for those teachers. Like, what a thing they do when they really catch someone, they really see little Sarah. How old were you then when you were Angel Gabriel?
I would have been 10, I think, 9 or 10. Mrs.
Right.
Burke.
Mrs. Burke, what a hero.
Amazing.
Yeah, Mr. Leeming it was for me.
Yeah.
And see you and have that opportunity to just really see you and catch something in you, see some, you know, a little spark of something that even maybe you can't see yourself, and then put you somewhere. And then what an interesting place it is, theatre, for all those reasons you said. You know, what I think is interesting now is I almost never go to the theatre anymore. Like I used to for a long time. I don't really miss going to watch stuff, but that experience, like for me, the being in things, like I learned, I do, you know, I have had magical experiences watching theatre for sure. I could probably talk for a whole 2-hour podcast episode about them. And the thing that was really transformational was like what happened in the creation, in the way that you're talking about, all that collaboration, also all the things you practice when you're going to be a part of a thing with, I don't know, 2 to 60 other people who are all going to try and create an experience for 2 to 120 people in an audience, right? Like, it's quite something that we are able to give to people and invite people into. And so how much was that then? So because there was further education, but there's also arts and culture in your career. Like, how did they, as you moved into the world of work, how did they interact with each other?
Yeah, so I did my degree in drama and theatre studies. And then there's always weird jobs that you end up doing. I did data entry in financial services.
I'm really glad to, by the way, just as a little aside, you've on your LinkedIn at the bottom if you scroll down all the work experience, there's like sales assistant for the AA or something.
Yeah.
The other day I was looking at someone else's LinkedIn and I was like, there's some other jobs that they haven't got on here. And do I need to take off? At the bottom of my LinkedIn is like, just like the things I've actually done as work, which includes a lot of administration work, you know, in different ways, in weird and wonderful places. It's like, so I was glad to see your time at the AA on your
I love that. And it was I learned so much, so it feels weird not to include it. Like, I was 16 and I'd got this job. I had to wear a terrible uniform. Oh goodness. And when it was in the summer, anyway, I mean, I made all sorts of mistakes in that job. Including charging someone almost £3,500 for their insurance because I added an extra zero. Anyway, it got refunded, obviously.
Yeah.
And what was the question? So you know, I was doing all of. I've worked since I was 16, really, which is why taking the time off felt a bit weird for me. So I did my drama degree with data entry, financial services. Met my husband there, actually, so I'm quite glad for that job. And then worked in FE, so then did my teacher training, teaching performing arts, and I loved it, although I have to say I had my worst experience of leadership in that role than ever in my whole career. Worst experience, which informs what I do now, actually. And did that for a couple of years, and then I really liked the tutoring, particularly. I ended up having to direct Godspell at one point, and musicals weren't really my thing, and there was part of me that was like so there was a bad leadership experience, and then there was also this thing of like, is this really what I want to be doing? I was in my early 20s at that point, and I feel like there's more. And so that's when I left there and started working as a community artist for a housing association in the southeast, and really loved that. I did that for about 3 or 4 years, bringing in artists to work with. I mean, we work with young people, we work with disabled young people, we worked with the gypsy and traveller community, we worked with homeless young people, we worked with older people in residential homes. I mean, like, it was just incredible. And what I learned from that is that actually we all have the same hopes and dreams and desires, and you know, at our core we are the same. And then that was when the 2008 financial crash happened, and it's a housing association, and what's the first to go? the lovely art department, and they tried to keep me on for 8. Like, I mean, they were brilliant. We're trying to, like, you know what it's like in the not-for-profit sector, and you're like trying to grab like bits of money from all over the place to create this little pot. But anyway, in the end, I decided to take redundancy because we were also going through IVF at that time. And then, so I had about a month. I think there was a month where I wasn't working, and then I came across this little ad in the paper, tiny little ad in the Kent newspaper that said looking for a project manager for this organisation called People United, and went for it. Luckily got it, and I was there for 10 years. I was the second member of staff. You know, so Tom had set it up, and then I came along. So yeah, it feels like a very natural kind of progression of the work. And then, you know, and I had children in that time, and it was this brilliant. I got to work with the most amazing artists, commissioning artists, work with amazing
for people
partners.
who don't know, and that's like a podcaster's way of saying I can't quite remember. Like, tell us, like, what was the work that People United was doing, and why did that matter to you, and how did it? I guess for you to stay 10 years, it must have touched into those values about belonging and all those things that were important to you. So yeah, how did that all meld together?
So People United it still exists. It's an arts charity that explores how arts and creativity can build kinder, more caring communities. And so the stuff we were talking about, I mean, it was about kindness, essentially. I mean, we started to really think about kind of values-led, a pro-social values-led methodology working with people. So that idea of co-creation. So rather than doing arts to people, doing a lovely project, popping in, hi, let's do this project, and then going away again, we wanted to do things that had much more longevity, and where you were working alongside people and understanding what they wanted to get from it. And we commissioned artists to look at particular topics. So for example, we worked with Manchester Museum to look at the idea of wonder, like what is it to feel awe and wonder, and we commissioned Sarah Punchin and Daniel Bai and Buff Worley to create this amazing huge performance piece within the museum, but it was all about this sense of wow, look at the world. And then we did stuff about love, and we did a commission on kindness. We looked at role models, like what it was to do role models. We worked with a school to do that. And essentially all of the work is about, I suppose, kind of trying to unpick some of these human characteristics, like what they mean, and how we can do good as a community. I mean, my podcast is called Do Good and Do Well. That's my philosophy and the name of the company organization that I'm building. And it came from, you know, it has come from all of that work that I did in that organization, really, that sense of how do we contribute to the greater good, and to understand some of these characteristics, what they mean to people, has really informed my work, I think, how I see things.
Yeah, but I know that also you must have informed all that work that happened at People United, right? Because you were the second person in, and you were there for 10 years, and I guess you and Tom must have, you know, led that work and created more the other people that worked there. And I think so. I know you've left. I think Tom has also left. So it's like, it's amazing. I think I had a conversation with him actually about the time he was leaving, about because he was interested in I don't actually know what he's up to. Don't think I've spoken to him since, but he was interested in, oh, maybe coaching is a part of what happens next for me. So it's amazing also that to catch it, because you said the company still exists. That's not nothing, right? The fact that the two of you that had been there almost from the start were able to leave and the company survive is quite something.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is down to, so Tom was very aware of what what could happen being a founder and then leaving an organization. So he did a lot of research around that, and he'd already run a charity and left that one, so he'd had experience in growing these charities. In fact, I've just recorded a podcast with Tom, which you can go and listen to if you're interested in this. But you know, that kind of sense of what it, when you create something from the beginning and then you leave it, there's a lot of research, or I think some of the research says that often those organizations can't exist without the founder. So I'm really proud that the organization, and they've just won this award from the Klus Gulbenkian Foundation around some of the work they're doing around culture of care. And yeah, I think we always talked about thinking deeply on things. You know, of course, sometimes there's a sense of urgency and you have to make decisions quickly, but where we could, we took the time to really think about stuff. And I think that really helped. And also we did a whole load of research on, you know, we worked with the University of Kent and the psychology department, and we did some really deep work on the impact of this stuff. So you can go to the People United website actually and like find, if you're interested, find the 3 research documents that we put together, which was essentially saying, what is it about arts that can help bring people together? It looks at some of the projects that we did, and then the third one is about our methodology and how it was about collaboration and co-creation and this pro-social way of working, which I think is a coaching approach. Yeah. It's about listening and challenging through questions and yeah.
I was really thinking that when you were describing the I can't remember how you said it, like art done to people versus art created with people. As you described that, if people can wind back like 4 minutes or whatever it was and listen again and imagine that you take out the word I can't remember what you said and put in the word coaching, it does sound like you're describing like one of those distinctions, which is probably, like, I don't know, this is my the armchair systems theorist in me is like, probably that is it used to work much better in a simpler time to you almost could create something for people, maybe, like, I don't know that for sure, in the same way that, you know, kind of top-down teaching worked better when the world was less, the jobs people were doing are less complex. But when the work people are doing and the environment they're interacting with are so complex, the idea of me trying to tell anybody or me know what the right thing to do in the middle of their life is laughable. But they know if you can help them, if you can create that with them. And I really remember that about, so we'll put a link to those research papers. We'll find that and link to it wherever people are listening, or at thecoachesjourney.com. And I kind of remember that feeling about People United when I was at CLAW and became aware of it through Tom, I think, having been a fellow and certainly speaking on those programs sometimes, and feeling all those things that you've just said. So it was like, you know, oh, this is something, this organization is unusual. I remember kind of, I hadn't thought about this until you were describing it. And then I was like, now it's like I can feel the feeling of this is unusual. And it's the kind of feel of what you were doing did have that thinking deeply feel to it. And I guess, I think one of the things that I wonder, I don't know what you think about this, because you probably remember it at the time and remember whether you felt like you were doing something really different. But it feels like some of those things, those words you were talking about, belonging, kindness, compassion, connection, the idea of being really, truly values-led in the way that you do things, those, I feel like those are more, it might just be because I've moved spaces, of course. I feel like they're more commonly used terms that more people are working towards now. I don't think it felt like that wouldn't have been quite 10 years ago, would it? Maybe it would have been 10 years ago when I first came across People United, and it felt like, I was like, I don't know if I ever had the thought, maybe I should try and get a job there, but like, why aren't more companies being like this? I remember really thinking that and kind of wishing they were. Did it feel like that at the time, that you were doing something that unusual, or was I just at the time or now not aware of really other people that were talking in that way?
Yeah, I mean, I think it did feel unusual because sometimes I found you know, when people say to you, what do you do?
Yeah.
And it was, you know, there were, of course, some people who got it immediately, but there were lots of people who were like, huh? Like, what? A bit like sometimes when you say you're a coach to people, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, I think when you're in it, it's hard. I knew that it was special. And I knew that I mean, I took a pay cut to work there because I really wanted to work there. Like everything that it stood for was what I wanted to stand for, what I did stand for. And I know, yeah, and I think particularly what was different is that we were working with the university. And that gave us depth to what we were talking about. So the research informed the practice, and the practice informed the research, and it was a really brilliant partnership. We worked with Dr. Dominic Abrams and Dr. Julie van der Viver, and they were and other people, and it was, so we were looking at impact, we were measuring impact alongside the practice, so that gave us a depth to it. And it did feel different. I think now, thankfully, a lot more of these words are being used. There's a massive shift, I think, in arts and culture around how we can do this more with care and with fairness, and less in a less hierarchical way. There are organizations, for example, Arts and Homeless International, they're doing work where it's a pretty flat structure in terms of leadership, and there are people with lived experience of homelessness leading those organizations. I think that there's a real change, there's a real shift in who is doing the work. I mean, there's a long way to go still, but it feels really hopeful in that people, we're starting to really think about who are the people telling these stories, who are the people that are leading. So to answer your question, it felt special. And also it was an organization, where we really worked hard to take care of each other and look at what we each needed. I mean, that wasn't easy sometimes, especially when you've got your funding applications to write and all of those things, and evaluation and that stuff. But yeah, we took care of each other. It felt very special.
Yeah. And you moved through various roles in that time, and at some point Tom did a coaching certification, and you were like, oh, there's a thing happening here. I don't know, there might be other things that you want to pick up on from that time, the changes of role you had, or what you were noticing, but what then brought that time to an end?
Yeah, so I think for me, it was partly about the people pleasing, which I mentioned earlier. So
maybe, Sarah, as you do this, if it works in the story, you could give people that sense of because I think you really connected people pleasing to empathy, or that thing about belonging. Maybe you could give people, as you do this, or separately, the sense of how those are for you two sides of the same coin, or what the connection is.
Yeah. I think the healthy part of me, my wise Jedi Sarah grounded self, has empathy, is able to care but disconnect from my own identity. The people pleasing, which I think you're right, it's the other side of the same coin, really, is about my how I felt unsafe, how I felt like I didn't belong. And if I keep people pleasing and being kind to every single person in existence other than myself, then I will feel safe and I will belong. And I think what happened is I mean, of course it happens in childhood, doesn't it? We know that, but I was always that one I was always the helper, the helper. That was my identity. I am good. I am a good person, and I will do everything in my power to prove that identity. And I think over this period of time of my whole career, not just People United, I talk about it as my kindness tank was depleted. It was empty. I'd like given so much of myself that could often be driven by my need to please, my need to belong. And I remember, I mean, I talk about this on my podcast and with others. I remember sitting in my mum's kitchen one day, and my children at the time were, one was in one infant school and another was in the junior school. So two separate schools. I was driving into Canterbury from where I live, dropping various children off, running various projects. And I remember sitting in that kitchen and saying to my mum, I just can't do it. Like I was going from mum to employee to wife to, I was like daughter, all of these like different things people needed from me. I just said I just can't do it. And then I came home and had a conversation with my husband, and then I kind of did a very I've still got it somewhere actually. I did like a pros and a cons, like why stay in an organization that I loved and why go. Did all of that, and then I was like, oh, I still don't know the answer. I still don't know the answer. And then I asked myself, and I don't know where this came from, but I asked myself, who needs me most in the world right now? And the answer was my family. And the biggest answer was me. Actually, I needed myself most in the world. And once I recognized that, and we did all the logistical, can we afford it, all of that sort of stuff, the decision was made. And I left, not really knowing, not knowing what I was going to do. I just knew that I had to recuperate, regenerate, restore, rest, faff about for it, be a parent, because I think also what I was recognizing, and maybe some of your listeners will recognize this, is that you give and you give and you give to other people, and then when you get back into your home, you've got nothing left for those people closest to you. So I was becoming really grumpy, really short-tempered. I was just spent. Like, and then my little people were like, they weren't getting the best of me. They were getting the leftovers, which there weren't many of those. A few scraps on a plate. So yeah, I just sort of felt like I had to, and I went back to work quite early after having children. I found the like baby infant period quite difficult, so I was like, I need work. I need work to feel nourished. And I suppose as well, I was noticing that whilst on paper the work looked amazing and I was still working with these amazing artists and still doing this other stuff, there was like a bit of me that was like, is this what I want to be doing? It's that question I had when in my early 20s and I was working in NFE, going, is this what I want to keep doing? I'd been there for almost 10 years. It felt like time to explore something different. So all of that came together, that recognizing that I was depleted, recognizing that maybe I was a bit bored, recognizing that I wasn't particularly nice to my family, recognizing I wasn't nice to me. Never nice to me. So yeah, all of that came together, and then I left employment.
Yeah. Without knowing what you're going to do next. And you kind of mentioned before that required some help from, people. You kind of talked about that a bit when we were talking about the challenge. and you said I think you said you had a few years gardening. So what happened, like, after you left? Because it's interesting, like, if you've really been in that state, it's a bit like, I get this echo of, when you're working really intensely and then you go on a holiday, and the first bit of the holiday is just like, how do I like reconstitute myself as as actual me, instead of this kind of slightly ghostly like specter that I've become, right? It's like, I imagine there might have been, that's obviously me, there might have been your version of that. What was it like to stop working after 10 years there, but also the time before that, and have a break from work?
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, we live in this capitalist society, don't we, that tells us that if we're not doing and we're not producing something, then what's the point? So I think it can feel really tricky. It felt tricky for me to be like, I need to do something to feel useful, and I think, the garden, I got an allotment when I was going through the IVF. We had one round that didn't work, and it was devastating.
Yeah.
And one of the things that helped me to heal through that was growing in my garden, because I felt like, and it felt, saying it feels a bit simplistic, but I was kind of saying to myself, look, you can't grow a baby, but you can grow a tomato. And there was something in that. There was something in that ritual, and looking after and nourishing, and then having the fruits of your labor, as it were. And so when I then left the organization feeling quite depleted, and knowing that I needed to, I mean, I didn't think in this way. I wasn't like, oh, I need to heal now, I need to restore myself. It was just a kind of instinct, I think. I got into the gardening, the planting, because I think, again, it's like you're doing something, you're using your hands, you're thinking in a slightly different way, and you see there's an outcome, there's something that although actually I'm not a great gardener, so there was also a lot of no outcomes, but you learn so much. I mean, I think it's a bit cliche, but you learn so much from growing things, and how to look after stuff and take care of it, and yeah. So yeah, and also at that time, I didn't feel like I could do nothing.
And let's catch that. So you said, like, part of it for you is like what it's like to live in capitalism, but you also had this thing, you've mentioned it, that's the third time I think you've hinted at this, like, I needed to do something, it's like, like the little baby phase, actually, like, after a while of that, I wanted to be doing something again. And so it's like, how did you find that kind of that little impulse? It sounds like, it might be wrong, that it is part, I mean, we all live in the society we live in, and you get stories from that about what a meaningful life is, what a worthwhile life is, and all that kind of thing. And sometimes those stories are great, and sometimes they are hard to live with. And it sounds like there's just something in you that I don't know if this is right, that being active is important.
Yes, I think it is, but I do really believe that part of that is around feeling useful in the world. Like, I really, there's a brilliant book by, again, it's called Rest is Resistance. I'm sure I'll think of the name.
Yeah, we can find a link to it. Yeah.
And I would really recommend it, because I think it talks about this idea of how it's so inbuilt with us to keep doing stuff, to be useful, to keep producing, and not allowing ourselves the time to rest and the time to imagine. Like, she talks about daydreaming, and I mean, she's talking about it from this sense of being a woman of color, and slavery, and people giving birth in fields because they just had to like keep working. They weren't allowed to rest. So I do think that part of it comes from what we're taught. Like, you've just got to keep doing stuff, because if you're just sitting on the sofa, sleeping, resting, who are you? Lazy? You know, it's like those kind of voices, lazy bones, all of that stuff. So I do think that's a big part of it. And I think I'm also I also like doing stuff. Like, I like growing, and I became chair of a small dance performance company. I became chair of my son's school PTA, which is that's a learning. That is a learning. And yeah, and then I did my coaching accreditation because I like learning.
Yeah, is that why? So why did you do it?
What, the coaching accreditation?
Yeah. What brought you to it?
Well, I suppose there was a curiosity. It also meant I could go to Lancaster for a few days.
Yeah,
which I quite like the idea of.
So I grew up really near Lancaster, so it's like at the time it was just this, you know, it didn't obviously not obviously when I grew up in the countryside near Lancaster, I didn't appreciate it, and now when I go there, I love going there. And like, this is because you trained with RD First, is that right? Yeah. So people, and maybe you can say a bit about RD First. I don't think I've tried to get a few people from RD First to come on the show and failed. And so for various reasons. And so maybe it'd be nice to, I'm trying to think if we have, I can't remember. I'd have to get up the list of guests and look down it. I don't think we have, for no reason except that chance, I think. For people who don't know, say something about it. Obviously, it's in Lancaster, which is, or it was pre-pandemic. I don't know if they do different things now.
They're doing much more online now, I think. I mean, it's worth checking out their website. So I was trained by Debs and someone called Claire Antrobus, and it's a coaching accreditation for people. Well, you don't have to do the accreditation. That's like an extra bit if you want to do that, but it's essential. It's for people who are in the arts and cultural sector, really, who want to maybe bring a more coaching approach into their work, or who want to become coaches. And so there was a safety in that. I knew a lot of people had done that course. I mean, I'm sure people listening will know how many different types of coaching training there is out there, and I like all of that logistical stuff, like who do you train with, who should you be a member, what membership organization should you, all of that stuff, like, is so overwhelming, I think. So I think what really appealed to me was that I knew that people had done that particular program and they really enjoyed it, and had got a lot out of it. And it worked in terms of timing, and as I say, I got to go to lovely Lancaster for 3 lots, I think 3 lots of 3 trips. And again, you know, connection, meeting other people in that world. That's sort of where my more formal coaching started.
And roughly when was this?
So that was, I can't remember if it was 2018 or 2019. No, I think 2019.
Yeah. And people should check it out. Like Deb Barnard used to run coaching training sessions on the Core Leadership program when I worked there, and she's an absolute master. And I know I've done some Claire's trained me once in action learning, and I know her, and I know Isabel, who did a lot of work there for a long time.
Isabel,
what a legend she is. And so they're amazing people running that training. And it's like, as a little aside, at least it used to be, I haven't looked for a while, it's really affordable compared to a lot of the other trainings that are out there. So I know that a lot of the trainings, for example, I think Barefoot have just done a thing where they'll offer interest-free finance to try and make their training more accessible. I know other training providers have their ways of doing their best to open up coaching in different ways. But it's worth checking out if people are listening and they haven't yet done a coaching certification and they want one that'll give them that way in. I don't know about I don't know how much the cultural sector thing is, because it's just because if Deb's been running training intros to coaching on Claw for 10 years, that's a really great way to get everybody from the cultural sector who finds that exciting, I wish they did, to do a training. Like, amazing business move. I'm sure that's not why they do it, but it's definitely a part of growing that business. And like, you could probably talk your way in if you really want to do that. And so
well, can I do a plug for, because
yes.
I'm actually becoming a tutor and a supervisor for some coaching training, not Debs. But if I can give you the link. But for my friend and colleague Catherine Powell, she's now running some EMCC accredited training coaching, and she's amazing. And I'm a tutor and supervisor.
Exciting. But it's less important to know. And so what's okay, let's slow down first with, let's do RD first. Let's finish that, and then let's come to this, because I think it's really interesting. So when you look back on that coach training, you said that's where you got your formal coach training. Obviously, you've learned about it from Tom. You'd been doing it in different ways your whole life. The approach of People United was that. I'm sure the teaching you were doing way back to the performing arts in FE was had elements of this there, because of that sense of belonging and witnessing people and seeing them. But what did you take from the formal training? How did that change how you thought about it? Or
well, I think initially I thought, oh, this is really hard. What do you mean you can't give advice? What? I took away the beginnings of that skill development and of understanding the wider context of coaching. I think since then I have learned, or what I have embraced, is that there's no one way to coach, and that actually what you're doing is you're bringing all of your skills and experience into these spaces. I think when you first do your training, it can feel it can, because you're learning different models, aren't you? So it sort of can feel a bit what's the word, that kind of clean coaching. It's like, oh, I can't say, like, I have to hold all of myself back from this conversation. And I think I've sort of now, especially after that 100-day thing, and also I've been doing this for a few years now, kind of got to the point where I have my own particular approach, and I bring all of those things. I'm like a magpie, bringing in lots of different versions and learning new things all the time. So I think I took away that it's that foundation, isn't it, that grounding of the bigger picture stuff, like what is coaching, how did it develop, who uses it. I mean, one of my biggest takeaways was that phrase, beware the guru, and I still kind of hold that quite close. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It's reminded me that and I haven't done the training, so I have to be a little careful, but it reminded me that I watching Deb do incredibly clean coaching was like, it's kind of amazing. So like, what I'd forgotten that at least it was when I knew a bit more about their training, that was a part of that, and a part of the way of approaching it. And two things that made me think of. One is, it's kind of like, it is amazing to watch. Like, I remember her doing a demo where one of those demos where she would just like reflect back the last thing that somebody said. And I remember the whole room like kind of laughing, not at it, just because it was so strange. And the woman who was being coached in that way, having no idea what was happening, because the presence and that connection of doing that kind of really clean work can just be so powerful for letting people do their thinking and see new things. It made me remember that, like, one of the interesting things I think about coaching training, I think it's quite important that it stretches us in that kind of, this is quite hard way to do the unusual things about coaching in their extreme before, so that we can then know what that's like, so that when we come back to calibrate somewhere, people on the video can see me doing this with my hands, somewhere like east of that or whatever it is, closer to where we normally are, we're doing it really knowing what it's like to
Yeah.
be full clean, in this case, full clean coaching, or, you know, ICF rules or EMCC
Yeah.
rules or whatever. And then if you're going to break a bit, like I mentioned before, you know the rules. There are no rules to actually what you do, but it's good to know the rules so that when you're breaking them in the spirit of the rules, not because you don't really understand why the rules are there in the first place. And once you've really practiced super clean grow-based coaching, and then then you know when that's really useful, and you start to get a sense of, oh, I wonder if I experiment with this bit, could I make this coaching even more useful?
Yeah, I agree. Where did you do your training?
I did my training with it was interesting because I was working at Claw at the time, and so I was surrounded by RD first training, and for a few reasons I didn't want to do that. Like, one was I'd kind of been on a bunch of Debs's half day and full day things, observing them, like, not a bunch, 2 or 3, and had helped a bit on some of those. And another, or no, maybe that was later. And another was I was interested in actually, I was kind of ready to be a little outside the cultural sector by that point. So I actually didn't really want to like double down on my cultural sector network. So I in the end ended up training with a kind of startup training that is mostly resting now. They don't run public facing training anymore, called the Coaching School, but it was great. And what they did a bit more, I think, than from the sounds of it, RD First do, is they did invite us into that thing that you're saying that you're really in now a little earlier. I think they were, which is not, neither is right or wrong, but it did allow me, I think, I felt permission. I remember doing some of those, like joining in as a partner on a full day coaching thing that Debs was doing on a short course, and finding it really hard to be in that place. And like I say, I think there's lots of good things about that, but I think it now allowed me to play with that a little sooner. Find that balance. Yeah. But it's interesting. So because one of the things I get asked quite a lot, I mean, not it's a huge amount, but reasonably regularly, thinking of doing some coaching training, where should I train? And I have a kind of fairly set response, which is almost all training providers will run some kind of taster thing, do a bunch of those and see which one feels good. And here are a few to look up. That's my general response. But it's interesting that you're going to be that your colleague is starting a new one. So and it's exciting that you're going to be able to be working on that. What are you looking forward to about that? And what is there a particular place that you think that training is going to sit in the marketplace of coaching trainings, or in the coaching ecosystem?
Yeah, I think we need, I mean, I said earlier, didn't I? It feels a bit overwhelming because there's so many training providers, but actually the reality is maybe there aren't enough, and there are kind of some really big ones, and maybe there needs to be more choice. What am I looking for? I really love hanging out with coaches. I just do. I think they're really brilliant human beings. So I'm excited about that. And, just sharing the joy and the power of it. Like, if more people in the world not necessarily became coaches, but knew about or had a more coaching approach, gosh, wouldn't the world be a much better place? I just really believe that. So I think, I'm really excited about being part of someone's journey. And like, I mean, I haven't been a tutor for a long time, but that was one of my favorite roles when I was working in education. And kind of just helping people to maybe feel more confident about what they're doing, helping them to work through some of the challenges they're facing. Like, that all feels, I mean, Catherine delivers the actual training at the moment, and I'm looking forward to that. And I think there's one space left on that training coming in September.
Yeah, exciting. But, and then we might come back to that, I don't know, but let's just rewind a little bit. So you did the training, and then you kind of hinted at this right at the start of the conversation, that then something at some point just before March 2020 said to you, actually, there's a thing I'm going to do, which is something to do with coaching and starting a business in this way. So how did that bit emerge for you?
So I had, as well as doing the coaching, I then I did one of the core leadership courses, the Pulse course, and through that, I got braver, like connecting with these amazing people, and had Isabel Mortimer coaching me for a bit, and that's amazing. And yeah, kind of, I mean, I'd sort of, when you apply for core leadership, you have to talk about what it is you want to achieve, like what's the thing that you want to bring to the cultural leadership landscape. You know, what do you want to add, what do you want to contribute to? And I'd sort of had these ideas about coaching and young people, although interestingly I haven't ended up doing that at all. But that was sort of the beginning. And then as I was working through that, I thought, actually, no, I can do this. I'd always said, when I was working in employment, I always looked at freelancers, self-employed, being like, wow, they're so brave. How do they do that? I could never do that. I need to be in a job. I need this security. I need this and that. And I think part of me was also thinking, well, you know, you've come this far to let go of that. And you're looking for something different. Like, actually running your own business or being freelance, why don't you try that? You know, get a bit out of your comfort zone and do that for a while. And then of course it was even more out of my comfort zone because there was a global pandemic, and I was like, oh my god. So yeah, that's sort of how I came about that decision.
And sitting here now, I guess like 3 and a bit years later, as we're recording this, what do you like? What's your reflections on that leap, on stepping into, I'm going to do this thing?
I am really grateful to my past self for being brave and having that courage. I mean, I think I am brave. I think there are parts of me that are very brave, and I've always talked about, I quite like being a little bit scared. I think I've been in that position quite often in my life, and then always seen a positive coming out of it. Like, just, you know, not like scared as in my safety is at risk, but that's that kind of my physical safety, should I say, but that just like the not knowing, you know, there's like, oh, what could happen? It could all go wrong.
All the way back to the
it
times on
could
stage,
all...
right? As the angel Gabriel, it's like, and this might work, it might not work. Anything could happen.
Oh, and exactly. I know. And actually recognizing that even if things don't work. So I did a solo in that play, and was very out of tune. It just all went incredibly wrong in one of the performances, but it was fine. I was safe. Like, I was still alive by the end of it, you know. And you know, there's been lots of times in my life, like the IVF, for example. It was a hideous experience, and I survived. And you know, and that took a lot of courage. I mean, all the things took a lot of courage in that. So yeah, so I'm definitely grateful that I have that resourcefulness in me. And it was, well, currently, right now, here and now, I feel like it was absolutely the right decision to make.
Yeah. If there's anyone who's hovering in that moment now, I mean, or you could play it as if you could go back and just, you know, like say something to yourself. What's the thing you know now that knowing it for like knowing it speech marks for sure in that time would have made a real difference?
Probably just that it's safe. It's safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
safe to do it.
I call myself with a client, we were talking about kind of this kind of leap, and we caught ourselves kind of saying, realizing just how, especially at difficult economic times, like how some of the employment thing, especially people working in big tech recently, it's like 2 years ago, you'd have thought incredibly safe place, growing forever, secure job, thousands and thousands of job cuts across that industry right now. In the last year, it's like there's some way in which that safety that we have in a speech marks job is somewhat illusionary, and the sense that there is no safety in the self-employed is also somewhat illusionary. And there's some truth in both those things, of course. But you will be safe. Yeah, beautiful. And so Sarah, like, bring us up to date a little bit with like what's going on in your business now. So it's like 3 years in. We know that you put yourself, partly because of probably Jonathan something, on WBEX, and we can try and work out who that was. If we work that out,
I've got it in my notebook somewhere.
Show notes. But something to do with him and your own creativity meant you did this crazy thing over the summer of 2020, and a really like honorable thing, because it was also, what can I do in service here, and what a beautiful thing to offer. And now you're here. So, and I know some bits of this because I've seen it via the internet and the magic, and we've spoken before. But what's your business? How does your business look now? What's the kind of practical makeup of it? How does it feel? How do you think?
Well, it's you're kind of catching me in a bit of a transitionary phase, because I've very quickly realized that I wanted to have a bit more of a business mindset around freelancing and trying and growing. And I realized that there's that stat. I don't know how true it is, but how many coaching practices actually survive. It's quite low, I think. And so I knew that I needed to be financially sustainable. So that's sort of what I've been working on. Over the last few years, as well as coaching. I love running a business, and so now I'm moving from more of a solo coaching, Sarah Fox coaching, into trying to create a company, an organization that is a bit more collaborative with other consultants and coaches, but that is really trying to help individuals and organizations to do good and do well, so where they flourish, both in terms of their well-being, in terms of their leadership, in terms of the meaning, having a real purpose beyond the core mission of the organization, perhaps, like how can you contribute to the greater good with your skills and your expertise and your wealth. So I'm sort of in this phase at the moment where I'm still doing a lot of the work. So I also work a lot with freelancers who want to make a positive impact in the world, but want to have a financially sustainable business. And that's sort of me sharing some of the things that I've learned over the last 3 years. So I run that program and still want to keep running that, because I think that's really important, because we've got these amazing people who are seeing injustice and have a way of making that a bit better, but they don't always have the confidence, the capacity to really make that impact. And
what's that program called, Sarah, just so that if people want to look
that's lasting impact. That's on my website. So I work with coaches, I work with people in the museum sector. They're mostly arts and culture, really, artists, that kind of person. But they're often overgiving and then often undercharging, and so we do a lot of the thinking around what is the difference I want to make, but also a lot of that nitty-gritty logistical, like, okay, how much do I want to charge? How much does my business need to make? How much do I need to put into my bank account so that I can pay my bills and maybe live a life that feels nice as well? So I'm doing that, and then sort of shifting into this working with people who might already have that financial sustainability, or who already feel like they've got the mindset to get stuff done, but there's a kind of internal conflict around, I feel like we could be doing more. I feel like there's something more that we could be doing to be helping the world. And so, yeah, I'm thinking about what that looks like and what the offer is that we can help them with there.
Yeah, exciting time. I imagine some, it's changed. There's probably a mixture of feelings about that. Like, yeah. And but let's I just want to slow down on there, because we had a funny exchange on LinkedIn about 3 months ago, as we recorded this, and it was in March this year, because we looked it up. We couldn't quite find the exact thing, but talking about the nitty gritty of these people's like businesses. It's like, okay, like what's the difference I want to make, but also how am I going to actually do that? Like, what are the things I need to do to actually be able to do that? It sounds like it's what it sounds like to me. And we had this great exchange, because I'd just written like an article about money stories, and we could try and find a link to that, and that I'll be able to do that. And then like about 2 days later, as I remember it, you wrote a thing saying like, I once got this advice from this coach who said, like, charge loads of money. And my article was like, it was basically an invitation for people who work for themselves and need to charge money for that, to think really carefully about the stories they have about money, because I've seen so many times people get wrapped up in really weird stuff about money that has nothing to do with money. And it's really affecting how they price their services and how they live, how they live their life. And exactly. Like, only everyone has some stories about money, so it's worth thinking about yours, essentially was the point of the article, I thought. And then you wrote this thing being like, I once got this advice from this coach to just charge loads of money, and it was terrible. And I've started a special group program, I think, just to sort of make sure that no one has to do that. And I was like, first I was like, oh my God, what if Sarah's talking about me? And I had all that stuff that I get from my, like, I don't belong, I'll get found out. Like, I had a whole flash of like, I'm not safe childhood stuff. And then when I slowed down and got into the, like, the what did you call it before, the, like, the healthy wise Jedi me, I was like, wow, it would be cool if Sarah and I really I'd be really surprised, and it'd be so cool if Sarah and I really disagreed about something about money, because wouldn't that be a fascinating conversation to be able to have? And sadly, I don't think we do. But what was that from all that? I guess from that stuff that you've done with freelancers, who often, it sounds like, the ones you work with really care about injustice they might see in the world, care about making a difference with their work, and are wrestling with the nitty gritty of business, or money, maybe. Like, and maybe it was around then you had a program called, like, Marketing Without the Ick, or a workshop called that.
Yeah, that was right. Yeah. Well,
like, remembered/researched. And so, like, what have you learned about that? Or when you're stepping out of your coaching self with those kinds of people and doing more of the mentoring or the teaching, what are you advising or teaching for people in those kinds of situations?
So with that, I think I get really frustrated by the narrative sometimes, particularly in the online coaching world, which is sort out your money beliefs, and then you can charge whatever you want, and you can become a millionaire in 6 days. I mean, I'm being a bit silly, but there is that kind of narrative around, and this idea of, like, money mindset. You've got to work on your money mindset. Pay me £1 billion so you can work on your money mindset, and then you can earn £1 trillion. Again, being a bit facetious, but that really frustrates me. And I know that what happens is that people have such complicated or complex relationships with money, societal reasons, individual reasons, all of that it is really important to do that work as well. But that doesn't mean that it has to become exploitative. And I think that's the thing I was talking about in that LinkedIn post that had really kind of got my goat that's a weird phrase, was some of those practices feel very exploitative, extractive. Let's get as much money out of people as possible so that I can then go on and make my 6-figure, 7-figure, 8-figure business. And then it's a bit performative sometimes, in that, because if we have money, then we can use some of that money to have impact. And, you know, here I can give this money to charity. And I'd had a particular experience with a coach who had taught, it's part of her teaching, that you kind of just pick a number out of thin air of how much you want to charge. You're just like, I don't know, high ticket, 10 grand for coaching, for example. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I think the approach of like just going, oh yeah, that's what I'm going to charge. And then we were taught to, on the sales call, to really get them to say yes on the call. And if they needed to, get their credit card out and pay for that on the call. Like, you weren't allowed to leave the call until they'd either paid or it was a definite no. And even then, there were like some practices of how you like keep having that conversation. And there were things like, if they object and they want to have a conversation with their partner, then you really have to put them off doing that, because it's got to be an empowered no. That will start the coaching off brilliantly, that they'll feel empowered to be able to say yes, and that they've made this decision and they've invested all of this money, and that will help the coaching be better because they've spent this amount of money on it. That this isn't answering your question, but that this is sort of where it comes from, I guess, is like seeing some of that practice, and then also being a bit more grounded about it and saying, look, what we need to understand is, if we want to make this impact in the world, we have to have sustainable businesses. And to have sustainable businesses, we have to have money coming into our organizations, and we have to be able to work sustainably. So if you're only charging 100 quid a day, actually the reality is you cannot have a financially sustainable business where you are not depleted and exhausted and in burnout, because you're not making enough money. And you might only be charging £100 a day because you feel that you're going to be exploiting someone if you charge something else. It's going to say something about you as a person, your identity. You know, you've always been generous. So especially I think with coaching, it, like for me initially, it felt like a really weird exchange. Like, I'm rocking up and I'm like, I'm helping someone, and then there's like this exchange of money. It feels like it can feel really icky, because also you don't want to be like the Trumps of the world, or you don't, you know, and because you're like so fearful of that, you lean back, you go so far away that you're not making anything, and you're not, you know, that marketing without the ick workshop is essentially saying you're so fearful about being like those types of people that you're not showing up at all. But actually there is a way that we can show up, and we can serve, and we can share. That's what we're doing. We're sharing what we're doing, and we're putting it out there, and we're saying, this is what I've got. Is this going to be helpful to you? Let's have a conversation about it. Yeah, I mean, there's so many things. I know I'm sort of jumping from one thing to another. But what I'm trying to do is to help people unpick some of that thinking around money, and to see how it is impacting on their business. And often the people I work with, they're not driven by money. Like, they're driven by helping, they're driven by community, they're driven by bigger than self-thinking. And we live in a world where you need to pay your bills. So it's about kind of saying, just because you're charging like a good amount of money, that doesn't make you a bad person. Actually, it makes you a person who's running a business that needs to be sustainable because you want to have an impact. Yeah. Blah, 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 blah. All the things.
Yeah, and more, Sarah. Like, we could probably do 2 hours on this. So let's ground it. How do you, if you don't mind talking about this, and you don't have to, of course, how do you think about, how do you price your work, and how do you think about that? And if it's not just making up a number, like, where do your numbers come from, and what are they, and how does that work to make your business sustainable?
Yeah. So I mean, I have done some work. I think you have to work constantly on this sort of money, what's happening for money for you when you run your own business. I don't think it ever ends really. But so the way that, so practically, I have a goal of how much I would like to earn in my business. And I am not near that goal. So the last financial year was the first year that I actually made more than I did working as an employee. But bear in mind, I worked in the arts and cultural charity sector. So we're not talking about
I
a
always say
massive
that
amount.
too.
Yeah, so
that's been true for me, and is with that same caveat. So wait, so this was and this was probably last tax year was probably your third year of tax year that you'd operated in, or something like that. But,
yeah. And I was so super excited because A, I got an accountant finally, and B, I actually, I will be paying tax next year. Yeah, when we do the tax return. I'll get my dates wrong. But so it's the first time I will pay tax, and I'm like, yes, it's happening. So I have a goal. My goal is I want to be financially independent. So it could be a privilege, could be seen as a privilege. My husband's always like earned pretty good money. It's allowed me. I mean, I think the art sector is basically built on people who have another half generally who like can afford for them to work in the art sector.
Very funny. Yeah.
And so part of my goal is about, I want to earn as much and more than he does, so that if anything happens, I'm not screwed. But also because, I just want to be someone who earns money, who earns good money. I mean, anyway, so I look at that, and then I make sure I understand all of my numbers. Like, I know how much my business costs me to run. I do invest quite a lot into, like, I have a VA who works, or actually she's now an OBM, online business manager, who helps me more with the strategy, all the software, the podcast costs money, as you know, I know all of that, know my numbers. I know how much I need to be bringing into the household income so that we can get our bills paid. And then I look at my services and try and sort of figure out that pricing from there. And I think I still think there's like, I've got to, there's still some work for me to do on kind of putting my prices up. But also I also look at what's happening, and so for example, my lasting impact group, I put the fee up, I think it was back in March, and I didn't have anybody join. And so I've kind of put it back down to what it was again when people were like, okay, yeah, that's a bit more manageable for me. But this is partly why I'm moving into this transitionary, like the company, because actually what I also know is that I often work with people who aren't doing very well financially. So A, they don't have the money to invest sometimes, and B, they're not used to investing in coaching. They don't like have that mindset of going, actually, this is what I need. So for me, that's sort of moving into a place, it's about impact. I think I can have more impact, but it's also, actually, I want to be able to kind of have those conversations with people that are like, yeah, I've got the money. Of course I have, does that answer your question? So yeah, it's about knowing your numbers, and then it's about looking at how much time you have. So I don't want to be working 80 hours a week. I take all of August off. I take all of the other school holidays off. So I have to take that into account as well. And then I just sort of try and do it that way, figure it out that way. Yeah.
I guess what I hear is that, like, you know, you called it the nitty gritty in the work you do in the Lasting Impact program with people. It sounds like that. Like, it's not like fun, like glamorous work, right? To work out how much the bills are for the company and the home, and then think about time in a really practical way. But it sounds like for you, I think it's basically been true for me as well, although I don't think about it in that much detail these days. I do a bit more of I feel. But I remember doing, I probably talked about this on the show before, I remember doing an exercise as part of my coaching training, looking at where I wanted to get to. I did it, it was part of the coaching training, and working back from there. And this was like early on imagining, and imagining it would be running alongside some other work, which I was doing at the time. And it was really powerful to have the numbers worked out. My experience of my personal finances in work and personal life, my finances for me, is doing the sums never makes me feel worse. Like my fears about money are always worse than the reality, even when the reality is bad. Because at least because part of the fear is underneath that I'm not really conscious of is, what if it's much worse than I think it is? And then when you know, it's like, well, I know how bad it is or good, and therefore I don't need to worry. So I think doing that sum is really important. I also hear that kind of challenge. That it sounds like you've seen a slight challenge with this group of people that you love working with and making it all add up. Which is that it doesn't, is what it sounds like. Is this right? It just doesn't really.
It doesn't.
You know, with those the constraints being what people in certain financial situations, or it really made me think of you looking after yourself as well, though, right? Because part of coaching or any other thing like this is looking after ourselves, and we're just not used to investing significant money to look after ourselves, really. Like, especially when we don't have much money, right? That's like the last thing we do, because partly out of necessity and partly because we don't have a pattern of doing that.
It can be considered selfish. You know, it's interesting the number of people that come to me, and you know, even that, you know, not even having a separate bank account, for example, for your business, everything goes straight into your personal bank account. So the idea then that you would pay for some coaching for your business out of your personal bank account is so screwy. It's like, I can't, you know, because then it feels like you're taking away from your family. And one of the things is about trying to like go, how can we get into this? How can we separate you as a person, you know, you're priceless, all of those things, to this is your business, like the coaching is your business. So what do you need to do there? What does the business need to invest in order, you know? So I recognized quite early on that I'll do social media, but like it takes up a lot of time. I don't feel you know, writing isn't, I don't really enjoy that as much, although I do love my newsletter. But so I recognize that by investing in someone who can take some of that stuff away from me so that I can focus on other stuff, actually that's brought in more money for my business. It's not really a risk, because it's been really helpful, and also just to have someone else to talk to, you know, as much as anything. But that kind of just separating self from business, I think, getting into that mode of talking about the business rather than I can't invest. Actually, what can the, you know, and I think that can be a bit of a struggle if you've always seen yourself as just a freelancer. And so it's like it's getting into, it is that nitty-gritty, knowing your numbers, but it's also really knowing yourself and separating yourself from the work that you do.
And look, on a really practical level, I got this advice from somebody else. It's not I mean, the numbers now are mine, but the idea wasn't the best. The thing that's made the most difference to my personal having my business and personal finances in order is basically, let me just say this for people listening. I've got an article somewhere which says it, but it's easy to just say it, is that when I was to split off my accounts, first of all, then it takes a while to get everybody to start if you've got people paying you on a regular basis, start paying into the right account. But in
Yeah.
the end, what I now do, every time I get paid, probably there's a software that could do this for me, but I do it manually because I quite like doing it manually, because I feel the hit of, I am in control of this every time I do it. Money comes in, it gets split 4 ways.
Yeah.
It gets split some to my current account. So this is like, somebody told me later on that there's a whole movement called pay yourself first, which I've never heard of, which I'm doing, which is like, or profit first.
But it's profit first. Yeah, I use it. I use that method.
So it's the same. Essentially, it's what I'm going to describe. But like, so some money, and mine is usually 50% goes into my current account that I operate my life out of. I use the number 25% to go into a tax account.
Yeah, me too.
And it's interesting. I remember somebody once saying that 25%, it needs to be more. And I've never found it needs to be more. Even, I will see this year. So this is the first year I've tipped into a higher tax bracket, or the financial year just gone. Probably. I'll need to double check it. I haven't done my accounts yet. It'll still add up then because of the expenses in the business and the tax-free allowance. So, and I think I've been like, when we moved into this house, we bought a new house, I took some money out of my tax account, partly as a cash flow move. Because you want to have for deposits and solicitors fees and that kind of thing. And I don't think I need it, because I actually think 25% is also what do you call it, like covert savings. But I then have 5%, which I always thought would go to 10, but I don't seem to be doing that, into a rainy day account. You could tell it was created while Game of Thrones is on, because it's called Winter is Coming. And then that means if you add that up, that 20% stays in my business account. I sometimes flex that in different ways, just for listeners, because it might be like, if I know I'm going to spend a bit more money on my business, and my current account is doing okay, I might leave a little bit more in the business and that kind of thing. But it then means that when I'm deciding whether to spend £100 on a workshop, I can look at my business account and go, is this a sensible investment? And it always is, right? Like investments of that scale, in my presence and insight and knowledge and learning, they're like, and especially when they're a workshop, because you might meet people, which might be, is the beginnings of business development. It always makes sense. And when you've got those bigger things, you get a bigger question. And then I had this great insight. Have I talked about this on the show before? I don't know. That the percentage thing is like a huge difference. Like, because it, like, psychologically, it just really works, because when you've been paid a tiny amount of money, I've had someone pay me a relatively small amount of money, £150, then 5% of that is such a small amount of money that it doesn't matter that I'm sticking it away in my rainy day account. And when I get paid £1,500, I've just got £1,500. Doesn't matter if I put 5% away in the account. So it's like, it slows down what's in your current account. So at first you feel nervous because you're used to having all that money in one place, but that was always an illusion. Because you're going to be, you're having that nice feeling of having all your money in your current account now, but you're going to panic like hell when you have to pay tax, and you're going to feel really uncomfortable when you're going to invest in a group program with Sarah Fox, because you're like, this is money for Sarah Fox or for my cornflakes for my kids. Like, what is the right moral decision there?
Exactly.
So I wanted to say that, because I think that getting into the practical of these things is really important. You might want to say something about that.
I would really recommend that. So I feel quite smug, because someone told me about the profit first really early on. So from very early on, I was putting 25% aside, and then like for 2 years I wasn't using it. So it's still in my business account. Or it's a set. I've got another account where I put the tax stuff to kind of keep it out the way, I suppose. But again, that cash flow thing, sometimes you need to move things around, but knowing your numbers helps you to make that wiser, healthier decision, rather than that sort of panic, oh god, I haven't got any money coming in at the end of the month. And like, people do take sometimes they take longer to pay, and all of those things. But I do a very similar thing. I don't have a rainy day account. I have a profit. So I put 5% into a profit. And every quarter I take half of that and I buy myself something really nice. Nice. Or I put it, like, I went on a retreat recently, which was amazing, and I used some of it to sort of pay for that. Felt very a special thing for me.
Just to catch it, I like that rainy day account. You do what you will, obviously, with this, but like, my feeling is, like that is quite an important move as somebody who runs their own business. A bit for the same reason that like you and Tom had to do so much research on People United for when you left, because if you get ill, or like some of this came from one of my former coaches who said that Rich said that when his dad died, he basically didn't create any new business for like a year because it had such a big impact on him. And he needed that money. And one of the things he said is, which is so true, you know, if your business gets more successful, the percentage is important, because it's really easy. And most of us have had times in our life where we've had more money and times when we've had less. And you don't necessarily save, right, in the times when you have more, because you buy one more coffee or sandwich out a month, or you go to the cinema one more time, or you're just a bit freer with not splitting a bill here and there, and suddenly that extra money you have is gone. So I think for me that's a really important one. And sometimes I bring money out of it, and you know, when I need to or want to. And like again, when we moved house, it was like, okay, how much of this do I need for the next year versus how valuable is it to have some deposit savings there.
And it's fine, but I think again, it's like coaching, isn't it? If you know the stuff, then you can decide what's useful to you and how you want to do it. And I think so one of the you know, talking practically, one of the things that I do is I don't move 50% straight into my current account. I keep it in a separate space. I use Starling, which I think is great, because also Starling have just brought out this ability to automatically do the percentage thing.
Nice.
Which is brilliant.
I'm still not sure I'd do it. Like it's just like a real out breath for me about my business. It's like, whew.
Yeah, I mean, you have
part
to
of my celebration of the money coming in, you know, all that kind of thing.
You have to write in every time with your, it's not an automatic thing. So you're still, I agree. I think there is something about every invoice, because again, it's like, then you get to know your numbers and you get to know what money is coming in. But what I tend to do now is within that, in the profit first system, it's called owner's compensation. That's like the name of the space. But what I do now is I pay myself a certain amount of money every month. So there might be some left in that owner's compensation. And my aim is to have 6 months worth of salary, income, revenue, whatever, as a backup.
So that's where your rainy day account is. I get it. That's nice.
And so every month I take out of my owner's compensation and put that into my personal account.
Yeah, and that also helps with budgeting, I imagine, in your personal finances.
Yeah, but again, it like takes a while to like figure this stuff out and like work out what works for you.
It does. And so what I would say to people but I'm always really aware of my tendency to think, when I've worked this out properly, then I'll do something about this. So that's the wrong decision. The right decision, this is one of those times when I just have a very strong belief, the right decision is to choose one of the things that either I or Seth, if you're not doing anything about your money in your business, choose one of the things that you or I have just described, start doing it now, and later on work out something better. And what I discovered is the thing that I panicked. I realized basically the insight I had that set this up for me finally after years of not doing anything was realizing how draining it was to worry about my money and not doing anything about it. The worrying about the money is one thing, but to worry and then not do anything was the thing that was just killing me. And so it's like, I need to do something. And so I'll start doing something now. And it turned out, as is often the case in my life, because I'm a overthinker and a procrastinator, it's like it turned out that the okay thing that I'll start doing now and I'll upgrade to something really good later was actually more than good enough. To last 5-6 years now for me. So I might come up with a better thing in the future and that kind of thing. So I just want to ask a question, because I think it's kind of like, it's been here. You don't have to answer it, but I just wonder, how do with that in all, because we've done a lot of discussion about money, but you didn't actually talk about the fees that you charge and how you think about that. And again, you don't have to, because it can feel sensitive, especially because we're kind of couching it in bigger stories about your family finance, given what you said. But like, how does that move with lasting impact, for example, to slightly more and slightly less? Like, what kind of numbers are you charging in those spaces?
So my lasting impact program is 1,800, which I think is an absolute bargain. How
does it work? What does it look like? So
you get 6 months of support. We have a group session every week, group coaching every week. You have a 30-minute one-to-one with me every month. there's a deep dive session at the beginning, a reflection session at the end. It's a hybrid sort of group one-to-one thing. And also we use Slack. We have an online group where you can kind of share. So for example, yesterday someone shared a blog that they've written that they just want to get a bit of validation about before they press send. So we all kind of support each other that way. So it's through, and I ask for people to pay that monthly, because then again, like, I can then see that the money's coming in gradually rather than me getting all like a lump sum. In terms of,
and how many people are in that group? Like, how do you think about the membership, and does it have a start and an end, or
it's evergreen. So basically, I used to do cohort stuff in that. What I mean by that is people would start at the same time and they would end at the same time, and that has its advantages, but also what I recognize is that some people aren't ready when you're ready to start the program. They're just like not in the right place, and don't have the money, or they've got childcare responsibilities or looking after elderly parents or whatever it is. And so I wanted to create something that people could come into at different times. So I sort of enroll once a month. Sometimes I don't get anybody. Sometimes this month I've got 4 new people coming in. And so I think that what's lovely about that is then you have people who are, like, we've got people who are at the end of their 6-month journey. They can also stay on for longer. So I offer like an extra 3 months at a time if they want to continue with me. So it's like an ongoing program, and I'm constantly kind of marketing for it and having conversations with people about it. And it's not enough for me just to do that. That will not, at that pricing, that does not create a financially sustainable business for me. I also do other things. So I'm an associate for another coach. So she sends me some work and she pays me. I have associates. So I work with an academy trust, and we run all of the coaching across the 9 schools in that trust. And I pay people to do that associate coaching. And I take, some of that fee goes to me. So I've kind of like got these bits. I also do like the odd one-to-one coaching, and I'm still like, and I think there's a lot of narrative around, like, don't do this is an hour of my time, this is how much you pay me, because there's going to be a ceiling, isn't there? There's only so many hours you can work, but people need that. So I do things like if people are coming to me for like the odd session and they're paying themselves, that's 100 quid an hour. If an organization is paying, it's 125 quid an hour. So that's sort of like, I would say that's probably top end for some people in arts and culture. Like, they think that can be quite expensive. And I know lots of people who charge less than that. So yeah, those are we're not talking, and like, I haven't got into that, for want of a better phrase, high ticket stuff yet. But that's what I mean about, like, I'm recognizing that if I want to be financially independent, if I want to meet my money goal, I have to do something different. I have to like find people who are willing to pay that for coaching, because I believe that it's valuable. Like, I believe it's worth that. Like, I'm not just going, I just want to make money. Like, I actually believe that you can have a massive impact on how people feel about themselves, how they show up in the world, how they, invest their money. Like, at the moment, I'm really excited about working with, I've been doing some work around philanthropy, and I hosted a podcast for Kent Community Foundation recently where we talked to a philanthropist, and we talked to someone who's researched philanthropy for like 20 years. And that really excites me. And like, how amazing would it be to be able to help someone who has been, air quotes, successful in their business, but who's like, again, that kind of internal conflict of there's more, what's the thing that I can do, what's my legacy, what do I want to, like, when I die, what do I want to have left other than the work that I've done in my organization or my family? How have I contributed to public good, to greater good? Like, that really excites me.
Yeah, and maybe this might be, we're coming up to time, so but no, I can really hear how that's exciting, and I can hear how it kind of resonates with you and the things you've been talking about that are important in your work. And I wonder, I'm going to kind of ask a couple of questions here and then do what you will with it. So one is a question. So members of the Coaches Journey community, which is my group coaching program, can, at certain levels, one of the benefits they get is they can ask questions of the people that are coming up. And one of them, who's spent a lot of time working in the charity sector in different ways, a lot of his impact has been there, was asking how you think about, I think it says on your LinkedIn or website, positive social change. That's a big part of the people you work with or what matters to you. And he was wondering, how do you think about that in your work? Is it explicit is there something explicit about the coaching you do or the people you work with? Is it the marketing message that enables the people who are doing that work to come to you? Like, how do you think about that? And I imagine that in there is a question that you gave me as part of the prompts, which is like, what's the why for doing all this for you? So I don't know what. This is what I love about interviewing people, Sarah. It's probably the same on your podcast. I don't have to ask coaching questions, right? I can just give you this messed jumble of ideas and say something to that, Sarah.
Say something to that. Wow. Yeah. It is. I think those two things are connected. Positive social change, I think I am really explicit about that, but also I think there needs to be some kind of exploration, interrogation into what we mean by that. If I think about my do good and do well, often a question that I come to is, well, what is, like, whose good are we talking about? And it's that co-creation stuff again, rather than like, well, I think the best thing for you is that we do this, like, I'm doing good here, aren't I good? I think we need to be really careful about that. I think we need to be very clear about why we're doing things, what we're getting out of it, being open about that, and making sure that we're not doing harm because we think we're doing good. The whole, like, everything that happened around Black Lives Matters, and people kind of really trying to exhaust people of color to get like this. How can I do better? You tell me. I think their intention is that they want to do good, but actually there's a bit of harm going on there because they're trying to excavate and take from others. So yeah, I mean, that's a whole other thing, but I think I am explicit in that I want my work to contribute to a better world for people, for planet. So whether that's someone who's interested in environmental sustainability, or someone who lives in a community and they want to support a particular group of people, someone who wants systemic change and is driven by that, like that stuff's really important to me. And my why, I mean, it goes back to what I witnessed really growing up. Being someone who lived on this council estate where the police would raid houses, where it was 1950, one of those 1950s built housing estates where you sort of put all the poor people together and like create these warrens where they can't get out, people can't get in. It felt a bit like that. I'm watching my dad really, as a disabled man, not live a life of, I mean, it's not to say that his life was completely devoid of joy and fun, and it's not that. This is a bit of a sad story. My dad died when he was 62. He died on Boxing Day, which was his birthday, and he was a twin, and we were all there, and there was like 3 days of awfulness where we thought he was going to go and then he didn't. And if anyone's been in that situation, I'm sure you can, yes, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. But I think, I was talking to someone the other day and they said, when my dad died, he said, her dad said, I have no regrets. And my dad had a lot of regrets. Like, he didn't ever feel like he was able to live up to his potential. he was excluded, he felt he was wrong. It's just, you know, it was just he grew up very poor. The doctors didn't understand cerebral palsy in the 1950s. Like, yeah, there were lots and lots of things that happened, lots of challenges. And like, I just think, why do we want to live in a world where that happens for people? You know, and I know, and things have changed. You know, things are better to some extent for some people. Like, I really recognize that. And there are lots of things that aren't good for people, that life isn't better, that actually maybe it's getting worse. And so, you know, if I can bring my skills, my experience, my perspective, and help people who can make a difference, who can help to make change, because we can't do it on our own. We just can't. It's a collaborative effort to make this world a better place for everybody. You know, and I know some people think that's really idealistic, and sometimes I get like rolled eyes, but it's just, I would rather live my life like that, trying to make a difference, a positive difference, in a way that has integrity and is shame-free, and where we get curious about saying, how can we help? How can we do this better? That's my why, really. And that's why I think positive social change it's just something we've got to strive for, surely. Question mark at the end.
Sarah, that was such a, yeah, thank you for sharing that. It feels like we're pretty much at time for this conversation. It's flown by. Is there anything that we haven't talked about or mentioned that for you feels important to say before we wrap up?
I think if someone's listening, or not if someone's listening, whoever is listening, hello. And you know, I think this can be hard, like, it can be hard to run your own business, it can be hard to be a solo coach, it can be challenging. Like, it does take courage every day to kind of, you know, keep doing this thing. Like, I suppose I just want to say, connect, like, find your people, join things like EMCC or association of coach, like, find the people who share the values that you do, and who you can talk to informally, formally, invest in a coach, whatever, you know, whatever it is. But don't kind of sit there in your office on your own doing it by yourself, because it doesn't need to be like that. So I think, yeah, that's in terms of, like, you know, what I'd love someone to go away thinking, that there are people willing to have the conversation about bank accounts.
Yeah.
And how much. It's
Yeah.
not all hidden.
And it's not evil to do that. And
No,
you won't
it's
be a
not.
bad person if you charge money, and
Yeah.
like it's it's a great place to finish, and it can be really hard. And
Yeah.
so don't suffer alone. That's what here. What a great place to end the call. Sarah, thanks so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.